Dude, I'm pumped to have you on.
Yeah, I appreciate you for having me.
Oh, for sure, dude. Do you want to start, I guess, by describing yourself and where you're from and who you are?
Yeah, my name's Ryan Leone. I'm
Mm-hmm.
29. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I'm an author. I wrote the novel Wasting Talent, came out last April.
That's awesome. Hell yeah, dude. Do you mind telling us a bit about like what the book is about in general, like a synopsis? Obviously, not the whole thing because the reader would read it for that purpose, but just like a bit of the idea of the book.
Yeah, I was a heroin addict for 10
Yep.
years, and the book focuses largely on experiences that I had,
Mm-hmm.
except I fictionalized a little bit of it,
All right.
and I made it about a musician, a guitar prodigy, that trades his talent for a life of heroin dependency.
That's nuts. Hell yeah,
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, I ended up reading some of the reviews online. I saw nothing but 5 stars from everybody that I had read, at least for a lot of the reviews. It seemed that the book like helped a lot of people who were either recovering or were on something in general and like needed like I don't know certain things in life. I feel like offer a chance of redemption, and that book has helped people I've seen from those reviews. It seems like so. It seems like what you're doing is very positive, and that's awesome. What did you learn from writing the book?
Well, 75% of the book is based off of real events that
Yeah.
occurred in my life. So there was a lot of internalization that went on while I was writing it. I didn't have a lot of clarity when I was using heroin.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that writing offered kind of a therapeutic way to internalize what I had gone through and try to make sense of it. I personally don't think that the book has a redeeming message. It's just a very bleak tale about addiction.
Yep.
I'm humbled by the fact that people have had a positive response to it, especially recovering addicts. I think it means the most to me when the book meant something to people like that. Um,
Yeah.
but I learned a lot about myself from writing it. I just learned what a completely senseless disease addiction is, and it's something that I definitely won't return to. I've been sober for 3 years, coming up in June,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, couldn't be happier with the decision. I went through a really rough patch there for a long time, and it just feels good to get clean. I think the book was really helpful in helping me sustain my sobriety because
Oh, are you still there?
had me.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, the book examined just the raw nature of it, and it helped me.
That's awesome. No, I
I,
mean
I,
like, oh, go ahead.
I have something tangible to walk away. All those emotional scars were just bled out onto the page, and it's really a reminder not to ever go back to that dark existence.
Are you supposed to be able to see him?
That's awesome. Wait, are you not able to see me right now?
No, I'm not.
Oh wow, that's my bad. Hold on, let me see if there's something wrong with that. Turn on. Hold on 1 second. There we are. Much
Oh,
better.
there you are.
That's a lot. All right. This whole time I was thinking, I was like, oh, all right. How are you? This is way
I'm
better.
good.
Yeah,
I'm
good. Yeah,
good.
it's like now you can actually see a face.
Yeah.
Yeah. This whole time I was like, oh, he's looking up. Like, oh, all right, maybe it's like, that's great. Well, I mean, other than the book being something that has helped other people, obviously, do you feel like because its message is so, like you said, bleak and kind of dark towards the end, it's a very strong, kind of gritty, like, I feel like if I were to read it, I've never been on heroin or anything like that, but it would probably be something that would detour me from ever doing it. You know what I mean? Because it's a powerful, like, this is what's going to happen to your life if you let it go out of control. And so it has this kind of message to it of like, don't even start, or if you are, this is what could happen. And like, so you were kind of showing a path that a character could go down by their choices, obviously, but those choices could lead them to spin out of control. And if they don't pick it up, it doesn't matter who they are or what they're doing, a drug or an addiction. It doesn't matter if it's heroin or crack or coke or anything. You could spiral out of control in your life and kind of lose sense or with reality, and kind of go down this dark spiral that some people don't come out of. Obviously, you did. You've climbed your way out into this feeling of redemption. I feel like the book, as you were saying, was therapeutic. You know what I mean? I think that obviously this is a very positive portrayal of you, but I think obviously other people are resilient, have gone down the path that you have written about, and so this is a very as resilient as you are in fighting addiction, and this is I guess a very good example of what can happen when your life spirals out of control.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and it should also be noted that I wrote this in federal prison.
Oh wow, yeah. Do you want to talk? Or can you talk about that at all, or would you
I
like
can,
to?
yeah.
I mean, like I said, dude, go raw, go gritty. I don't care. Like, tell your story. Like, this is your chance to just say whatever. I don't care. Don't feel censored
o-
at all.
okay, well, let me start out in the very beginning
Yeah,
then.
dude, I want to
So,
hear it. Like,
yeah, I had a pretty traditional entrance into drug addiction.
mm-hmm.
I started smoking weed in high school.
Yep,
Moved on to the PG-13 drugs, the acid, the
yeah,
ecstasy, the mushrooms.
yep,
Um,
psychedelics, all that.
yeah, I was involved in the rave culture in high school,
Yep.
and eventually I got into cocaine, and that was the big turning point for me. I mean, the moment that I got addicted to coke, it was over.
Yeah, that party scene probably.
I went to house parties. I grew up in
Yeah.
Santa Barbara, California, which is pretty picturesque beach
Yep.
town in Southern California. It's a beautiful place, and there's a lot of money there. In scenes that have a lot of money. So there
Yep.
were a lot of kids spending their parents' money on
Oh
cocaine.
yeah, dude, just blowing
And
cash. Yeah.
yeah, and I just fell into that. Cocaine. I got expelled from 3 high schools within a month. It
That's
was all for
nuts.
drugs. My parents sent me away to institutions to try to get better. I think that exasperated the issue. And when I came out, I started smoking heroin.
Yep.
I was a full blown heroin addict while I was in high school still,
Wow.
and went to my first rehab solely for heroin when I was 17. Um, and the needle hadn't come into play yet. That's when things really
So you
took
did
a.
eventually like get to that level with the needle as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I ended up getting some things published while I was
Mm-hmm.
in high school, poetry, short stories,
That's awesome.
and yeah, that was kind of the gateway into a program that I went to in Boston that was for writing. It was for television. The fact that I get a program,
Yep.
and I was going to do that, and then I was probably going to try to go to NYU or UCLA or USC. I didn't have that great of grades. I had, like a 3.2 average in high school, that I got at those institutions that I was at. But the fact that I was published was opening some doors for me. So I went into that internship program, and it was a very artsy scene. A
Yeah.
lot of the people were doing painting internships, things that related to art, and intravenous heroin use was a major part of that scene. That was the drug of choice by the people that I was surrounded by. Started hitting the needle when I was
Yep.
18, and never looked back. I went to probably 18 rehabs. I was fortunate that my parents were supportive the whole time.
Yeah.
Um, I started selling heroin when I was 20,
That's
and
nuts. Oh, just from
yeah,
my point of view, because it's like that's a whole different like route to kind of go down. You know what I mean? Such an earlier age, I'm like, what was I doing at 20? And then it's like, yeah, I started selling at 20. It's like
yeah.
it's a
I mean, I thought that it was the lesser of two evils. I had friends that were doing armed robberies
Yep.
and, just being very
Mischievous. Yeah. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like your friend group. It was just like what your friends were doing at the time, and so
Yeah, so I thought selling it was more benign to society. I mean, this is how I thought in my drug delusions, at least. This is how I justified it. And
yeah.
I started selling, I'd buy an ounce and sell grams out of it. That eventually escalated to pounds and then kilos.
Yep.
Um, so by the time I was 23, I'm making about 10 grand a week.
Yeah.
I'm driving nice cars. I'm all the symptoms that come with being a drug dealer. I
Yeah.
was enjoying, and the money became an addiction in itself.
What's
Like
the
when you're,
lifestyle? You had access to just things like that? Like, hell yeah, you're gonna keep doing it. Like, there's nothing, no one's saying, hey, don't do this. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah, and I mean, I was eating it up. I had Andy Warhol lithographs on my
Oh,
wall, and
wow.
I was, I don't know what I was doing.
Be like the
I was trying to
Scarface
live it.
style. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
just like
and
make money in, like, yeah. The American, I feel like, kind of archetypal dream, like making it, but like in your own way.
yeah, and I thought I thought I had made it. But what ended up happening is the woman that I was dealing with was this lady that lived in East LA, and she had gotten arrested by the FBI and DEA, and she ended up testifying to a grand jury about me, saying that I bought, I was distributing it to Santa Barbara, and I got arrested by the DEA, and they said
That's
I was going to
nuts.
do 10 years in prison. Um, Spent over 50 grand on an attorney, and I got this really good one. He was one of the guys that represented Michael Jackson.
Johnny
And
Cochran or no?
no, 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 no. His name was Robert Sanger. It was for one of the molestation cases,
Okay.
but it was
Oh
just one of
yeah.
the best defense attorneys that I could get
You
in
could
Southern
get with the money.
California.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went in there, and they said you're looking at 10 years. In the feds, you serve 85%. So I was looking at spending about 8 years in federal prison, and I had never been to prison. I've been to jail before, but
Yeah.
just the prospect of going to an actual prison scared me. It scared the
Oh
shit out of me.
hell yeah, dude! You were actually there for 8 years.
No, 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 no.
Okay, I
I
was
fought
like, dude, tell me about that. Like,
Yeah, I fought the case for about a year, and we got a deal where I was signing an open plea from 5 to 40 years. So
yep.
the minimum I could get was 5 years. The maximum I could get was 40. Big gamble because they could. We already knew what evidence they had on me. They had wiretaps.
Oh wow.
They had a half pound of heroin that I got caught with, which
Mm-hmm.
wasn't even what I usually had. I usually had a lot more. And if I did have a kilo on me, I would have done 10 years for sure. So I got very
Yep.
fortunate that I only got caught with a
What you
half
got?
pound.
Yeah.
And they ended up giving me 60 months. And, I went, and it was violent. It was nightmarish. It
Yeah. Is there
was
anything you can intense like that you can remember specifically, like that you want? You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. I completely understand. That's probably insane in there. Like different culture
well,
entirely, or like
you,
is it stereotyped or like or exactly or
one rape. You hear about rape, and it's portrayed in film, it's portrayed in popular culture as something that just happens all the time in prison. It's
yeah.
not something that I saw. It happened one time while I was there, and it happened to a guy that was openly gay.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it. And it's that happened to him, but it wasn't something that was going on every day.
Yeah.
People were getting stabbed all the time.
Oh shit.
That really happens. Um, I mean, I was at a rough prison for a year. I did 4 years in prison. The first year I was a very, very rough high security prison in California. And, that whole time I saw fights a few times a week. Um, I saw somebody pour baby oil on someone's face and their eye came out. One of the more violent things that I experienced while I was there.
That's nuts.
Um, yeah, and there were stabbings. That was a routine thing. Um, when you got people that are, the majority of them are doing 30 years or life sentences, because that's how the federal system is. It's a system that absolutely promises to lock you up, and it's for a lot of nonviolent drugs.
Oh yeah, the system's completely rigged in many
Oh
aspects to
yeah,
provide free
it's
labor. Like it's a monetary system at a certain point when you have private prisons, like providing labor and like which becomes free at a certain point when you're locking up people for victimless crimes. Not that like certain things like heroin, that could be wrapped up in a bunch of other crimes that are going on because of the type of drug it is. But if it were something like marijuana, I would say, it's completely different. But I mean, that's still wrapped up in, different types of cartels as well.
yeah. I mean, you got a lot of my friends were doing 10 years for marijuana, and that, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's a fallacy.
Yeah.
It's an ineffectual policy. What I witnessed firsthand is that it takes nonviolent criminals and it radicalizes them. It makes
Yeah.
them
It
violent.
makes them violent because you're putting
You
them
know?
in like four walls with a bunch of people who need to be there. Certain people like maybe do need to be there. And like they're surrounded by that 24/7. Like they have to put on this psychological like external shell. They have to create their own mask in that place to survive even. And then when you put them back in society, it's like sometimes maybe it's hard to take that mask off, or like if it is even a mask, because you spent like
Yeah.
4 years in there, like you're creating this whole new person, and to just snap back to who you were before is probably not that easy.
It's very hyper masculine. It's very racist. It's
Yeah.
very misogynistic. There's a just this overwhelming hatred towards women in prison, which is, I would have never, they objectify women, and
Yeah.
it's very racist, and it went against all the ideology that I'd been conditioned to growing up in a very progressive household.
Hmm.
Um, And, I've never been a violent guy. That's just not something I have in my past, but I engaged in violence in prison. I had to.
Yeah, to
Um,
survive, like you have to
it's,
turn into a whole new beast. Like it's
it's,
the conditions of your environment are different.
yeah, um, you know, I saw somebody get their face slit open with like a straight razor blade one time.
I
They
believe
got
it.
like
Yeah.
6 gashes, and I mean, just horrific, horrific imagery. I was very fortunate that I got transferred to a prison in Wisconsin called Oxford after I was at the place in California. And that place wasn't too violent. It was about
Yeah.
as violent as your average high school keg party. There were fights, but
Yeah.
there weren't stabbings, and there weren't the politics. California, because it's so segregated,
Yep.
because so many gangs, it's so political,
What about the
and
guards?
the guards are assholes,
It's like
they're
there must be some I'm sure there's a lot of crooked like because I've heard of like not specifically that your prison, but where guards will pit people against each other and stuff like that. I found a prison the other day that got caught doing that, having like gladiator style prison fights, just because guards at a certain point, it's like that fraternal brotherhood. I didn't see anything, and it's same with like the police at certain times, like who else is there to tell if it's just the guards? You know what I mean? Who are the
yeah, I
prisoners going
mean,
to tell?
I mean, it really is contingent on which prison you're at. The first
Yeah.
prison I was at, the guards were completely turning their eyes to violence. Violence occurred all the time, and
Yep.
there wasn't a lot of police obstruction to it. At the other place, because it was a nicer environment, pet, um, but it was a good trade. It was just so nice to be out of that combative environment.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of drugs in prison.
Oh yeah, I
Um,
would imagine.
More drugs in prison than there are out here. I mean, it's just more accessible. And I was addicted to heroin in prison for the first, 2 years that I was in there. And
That's
a
nuts.
gram of heroin's $400 a gram, and I was doing a gram a day. I was still
That's
coming off
nuts.
some drug money. So if you can imagine the debts and juggling that and always being
Yeah.
worried about getting your money, because it doesn't matter how much money you have in the free world, there are barriers that are set up as far as how you're going to get it from your family or your friends, and they
Yeah.
start questioning you after you're like, yeah, send 3,000 to this person, send, it's a very hard juggle, and that's
Yeah.
part of the reason that my prison experience was so difficult for me, is because I was still so dependent on heroin the whole time I mean, the first 2 years I was in there.
Yeah.
um, and I found real solace in writing and literature. Started reading it, and that was my big escape, and it was free. You know, I the book that I wrote, Wasting Talent. I'd say the first half of it was written under the influence. The second half was written sober. So
Yep.
there's, it's very nuanced in that regard. Um, but writing was something I fell in love with, and it was a great escape, and it's a great form of art, and it's something that I think I'm going to continue to do for the rest of my life, and
Hmm.
hopefully I can make a career out of it.
Well, I mean, you physically like been able to bring something into the world that is changing people's lives. So I mean, that's a positive, and like this is the beginning to something much greater, anyways, because you're already on that path. But like the book, I feel like was like the first seed. You know what I mean? In the garden of stuff that you're trying to plant, and I think that it's a very good path to be following just because I haven't personally heard too many stories about like heroin addiction one, but I know a lot of friends of mine that have been addicted to heroin, or a couple at least, that have even had to go out to like California and stuff to like get help. So like I think that it's good to have a voice out there for people that might need to hear it. You know what I mean? Like I know that there are people out there that might be struggling like right now, but something as easy as like reading your book, which is something that like you no longer have to even think about anymore. You're done with it and it's out there. I mean, well, you're still thinking about it in certain aspects because you're trying to market it and get it out there. But overall, now that it's out there and it's done with, like it's a bastion to these people who like need help. And like I think that for someone that's already gone through these experiences and like overcame them, you're like a hero in that aspect, that like you didn't give up. Like no matter how hard it was. I mean, like your story is a lot more involved than most people's I've heard. But with heroin, like it's nuts. Like you had to go to jail and like a bunch of aspects. So it's like you overcame all that, and you're still here, and you're still trying to do more. And I think that's a very positive and heroic thing to be doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And, I'm not in a 12-step program. That's
Yep.
not how what ultimately ended up happening is I shot heroin June 12th, 2013, about 9 months before I got
Mm-hmm.
out of prison, or 2012, I'm sorry.
Yep.
And I got drug tested in prison, and
Oh
they put
wow.
me in solitary confinement for 60 days. And that was the most cathartic experience I've ever gone through in my whole life. It was so transformative because I had 60 days where I couldn't talk to anyone. They didn't give
Mm-hmm.
me a book. I didn't have music. I couldn't even write, you know. There was nothing I could do except for reflect on the mistakes I'd made
Yeah.
from that point and where I wanted to go in the future. And I just made a promise to myself on that day that I'll never use drugs again. And I found that the thing that's helped me the most is fitness. I
That's
power
awesome.
lift.
Yep.
I lift weights 5 days a week. I've had a shoulder injury, so I've been out of it for about a month.
Yep.
But
The
we're
rotator
getting
cuff
ready
or
to
like something.
rotator cuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I've had similar with benching, just like in the yeah range of motions all. But
yeah, yeah.
anyways,
We're gonna go try on Monday
nice.
to go back to the gym, and I found that, I mean, it emulates the dopamine and endorphin rush. It's very comparable to heroin addiction,
Yep.
that rush you get from shooting it. I feel the same thing when I do powerlifting.
Yeah,
I've
that
tried
adrenaline
everything.
boost, that like
Yeah,
feeling of just that goosebump on your like I don't know, it's just that raw feeling of energy. Like I know exactly what you mean. It's just like if you feel alive for a split moment, like a battery that's on. It's just like yes. But it takes
yeah.
like
It's
getting that pump and like getting that thrill of like I am doing this, and then that creates this like physical, emotional, and then psychological surge that kind of triggers this dopamine release and serotonin, and then you just get this rush.
sure. Yeah, I attribute fitness to
Hmm.
my sobriety more than any other aspect of my life.
That's awesome.
Um, I'm also engaged to a girl who is 18 months sober,
That's
and we
great.
have we have a nice sober symbiotic relationship where we both, it's very mutual.
Yeah, and you guys help each other. It's because like it's like a give and take, obviously. But that's what a relationship is. But it's like I know like I'm in a relationship as well. But there's times where I might be down. She's there for me. But at times when she's down, I can be there for her, and we help each other in that aspect. Same way you guys might be able to do that, especially both recovering. Like if one of you feels that, it's like the other can kind of like grab it back to the center.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's yeah, and I've cut a lot of my friends off that use, like
Oh
I
yeah,
got out and I was, welcomed with open arms back into the old scene that I was in. Um, I was kind of looked at by my friends or by my associates like, okay, you took one, you didn't snitch anyone
yeah,
out, you went and did your time. If you want it back, here's it back,
yeah.
and they were pretty much ready just to hand it back to me right when I stepped
Wow.
off Facebook, and I just don't want to know anyone anymore. The only people I want in my life are people that can positively contribute to it.
Yeah.
Um, and there's just so much negative energy
Oh
in my
yeah.
hometown. That's why I moved to LA. I wanted to just get away from my hometown and not be around people. And we've found it pretty successful down here. We're not tempted.
Yep.
We go to concerts where they serve alcohol, but we don't drink. And like maybe the few friends that I have that do use, maybe they just smoke weed or something. They
Yeah.
don't do anything.
No, yeah, I'm completely all for. I mean, like everybody is their own thing, but like for positive for weed, like as long as like, I mean, you're not gatewaying into other things, like how you said, like it started with weed and then this escalates to that. But I mean, I feel like that's more an addictive personality over the substance at a certain point. Whereas like heroin is addictive, obviously physically, and in many ways all like emotionally and psychologically, whereas I feel like weed's more like a psychological addiction as opposed to a physical addiction.
Yeah, no doubt. And heroin's also spiritually addicting.
Oh yeah, I'm
Um,
sure you probably had some intense, experience depending on who the person is, the user. You know what I mean? Like any substance can have like a very vivid spiritual experience depending on how you use it, and you associate it with that experience, and you want to keep achieving that spiritual experience with that like substance, but it gets harder and harder, and then you become a user after a while, trying to achieve, like spiritual experiences with a substance.
yeah, well, what I found is, or what I find now is that I'm spiritually grounded.
Mm-hmm.
I do things on a daily basis to try to help myself or help other people. I'm not as selfish as I used to be. And when I was on heroin, it just like devoided me spiritually. It took me so far away. I mean, I'm agnostic.
Yep.
I'm
Oop, you're cutting out. Oh, there you go.
like radical interpretation of higher power.
Yeah.
It just means its own thing to me. But all that stuff was completely non-existence when I was using.
Wow. That's nuts. I mean, like I've never had like an experience, obviously, with a drug based like heroin that strong. I mean, I've done like I've smoked marijuana, I've done shrooms, and had like my own experiences that way. But like I've had like a kind of on the opposite scale. Like I've had spiritual experiences. I'm not religious in any way, but like I do believe in like something, but like I just don't know what it is. But like I believe in the universe and like something that like made all this. But I mean, what does that mean to me at the end of the day? I don't concern myself that much with, it doesn't affect my life how like someone who might be Christian being like, I can't do that because, of this or something, where I kind of, I've had my own kind of experiences with shrooms that are applicable, I feel like only in a sense to me. But I mean, they can be rendered to other people. I can give knowledge out by what I've learned or something during that experience, but it's in the form of like wisdom that might help them, but they can never have what I had by just visually experiencing and like audibly, like whatever that sensation of an experience is, like during that phenomenon, is forever with me. So like that's why like I like something with shrooms I'd advocate for myself, but I wouldn't advocate for someone else because they might become addicted to it. They might do something negative, with it because they might have a negative mindset or personality, and then the shrooms enhance that. Or like or any drug really. Anybody who has like schizophrenia or depression, certain things like you probably shouldn't be taking stimulants. But I don't know. It's my opinion.
Well, I mean, you know what? I'm sober, but I
Yep.
would I would do acid again. I'd do
Yeah,
mushrooms again.
I mean, like that stuff. I feel like is more natural. I mean, like the only reason I do it, I feel like people are like, "Why would you do that stuff?" And it's like, it's not just to see stuff on walls and whatever. Like there is some shit going on, like when that happens, and like what is this whole thing, anyways? You know what I mean? Like, what is the meaning of life? And like, not that shrooms are gonna give you that, but I feel like for me personally, in a split second, it was like, whoa, this is what it all is, and it was just like I didn't have to say anything, think anything, do anything. I just knew. And then obviously that kind of goes away with time once the drug wears off. But like during that time, you can learn so much, and like some of the craziest things ever built like have been on the use of psychedelics, like the laptop. I think it was Steve Jobs was on acid in India or something like that when he thought of his whole scheme for Apple. And just like so like I mean, not saying like do drugs and like you'll be smart and all this stuff, because I would never advocate that at all for anyone. But I do see the relevance in some stimulants for people who willingly choose them that are non-harmful to the body, that produce these experiences. Because I feel like we could fall into that category. Because I don't know, other than the aspect, yeah, it makes you a little bit lazier, it gives you more adipose tissue, fatty tissue, because you're not working out. There's all these side effects, but there's so many people that I feel like use weed that like are very athletic and work out, and it's not really the drug, it's the person.
Yeah, with psychedelics, I always got enhanced clarity because it allowed me to examine myself from another perspective.
Oh hell yeah.
And I think that's a valuable thing.
Hmm.
A lot of people in recovery have this debate and are, kind of indecisive about what psychedelics purpose are. I mean, Bill W., the founder of AA,
Yep.
he talks about dropping acid in
Acid is one of the
recovery.
steps. Yeah, I've heard of that.
So I think what happened is in the 60s people were so idealistic
Yeah.
and so open that they used psychedelics for spiritual means, and we've become very materialistic as
Yeah.
we've developed, and I think people look at that stuff as more of a silly thing now.
Oh, for sure.
um,
It's like you associate that with like stereotypes such as like a hippie or a stoner or someone that's not doing anything with their life. Like, oh, you tripping still? Like, and it's like, dude, some of the most successful people in the world are doing shrooms. Like, and they're doing their job, like from stand-up comedians and entertainers to, athletes that have admitted that, like, oh yeah, I do shrooms, and like, there's been MMA fighters. There's been like Joe Rogan does that, talks about it all the time on his podcast. Like, I don't know. There's many advocates for it, but I can see at the same time, yeah, like not everyone should do it, but I mean, it shouldn't. You shouldn't lock people in a cage for doing it. I don't. I think that's where like we would go back to that point earlier about there's a lot of people in prison that don't necessarily need to be in there for victimless crimes, and we're filling prisons with people. We're just like shoving them in there, and a lot of them are, not angry. They're non-violent offenders that really are only in there because of technicality or a law that got passed so many years back that's just to make people money. And these people turn into criminals or by necessity sometimes. Not all of them.
yeah, well, you were talking earlier about the privatization of
Yeah,
prisons, and I think when the prison industrial complex comes along and starts profiteering off
there's
people
going to
being
be a problem.
incarcerated, and then you have these completely archaic laws against totally harmless drugs like marijuana,
Yep.
I think that it's a narrative that the
Yeah.
country should be having. I mean, besides the fact that it's costing us millions of dollars, incredibly it's an incredibly negative impact for families, and there's just
Oh
so many
yeah.
waves of
And the
of
stigma of
life
having gone to
destruction.
jail, people like, oh, you've been to jail, but it's like, dude, if I went, they made me go for something that like shouldn't even have like been a drug. I mean, a law. Period. I mean, it's not harming anyone, and like, there's plenty of research out now on marijuana. We already have it legalized in a few states, like. I mean, not on a federal level, but like on the state level. But like, I think that the fact that like more and more states are waking up, to legalizing that, we know that it's not bad anymore. Like, we're not reefer madness propaganda like infused with like, oh my god, he smoked weed, he's gonna lose his mind, or he's gonna eat someone, or like all this like idea of like what marijuana is. And I feel like the big problem is someone who's never smoked marijuana. Um, and it's hard to describe an experience in the same way, like if you've never gotten drunk before, it's like, how do you, oh yeah, your body feels like this, or like your mind's going to be a little bit slow, but like you can't really, you try to physicalize what that would be like, but you can never really give that to anyone. But the experience of like being high, and what like it's shown as in media and like TV or propaganda and stuff, or like you're gonna get high and kill someone, or you're gonna get high and jump out a roof, or like do something stupid, or you're gonna ruin your life, or like all these things, or be a vegetable, and it's, or a couch potato, like. And I think that's wrong. I mean, it's not even accurate of like the plant itself, what it can do for people, and it just like kind of pinholes to this one argument of all these negatives that really in reality don't even exist. I mean, they're stereotypes.
Yeah, I don't like marijuana personally. It
No, it's
makes
not for
me
everyone,
it makes me insecure. I'm like one of those guys that becomes very over analytical on it. If I'm in a room full of crowded people, I'll
start thinking way too much.
was what I just said sound cool? Shit that I just would never think about if I was
Yeah.
sober. So marijuana doesn't work for me, but it's something that I think is okay for other people. My recovery is pretty stringent. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't smoke weed, I wouldn't have a drink, and I wouldn't do any drugs except for maybe psychedelics. And maybe that's just my naivety. I don't know. I'm not. It hasn't been offered
It's
to
for
me for a
your
long
soul
time.
to decide for itself, you know what I mean? Like when the time were to come, if it does, and if it ever did, like, you know what I mean? If it's meant to, it will, like, come into your life and you'll decide it. But if it's not, then you won't. Like, it's not anything that I know you're seeking. It's
Yeah,
just
if
there.
if if the opportunity presented itself, and that seems to be the way that LSD works, just some
Yeah, the same
random
here, dude. It's always
coincidence
the
comes
most
along.
random synchronicity that, like, this shit, I am here for the right time and the right reason, and I don't even know why this is all happening, but I'm doing it. And then that's how the whole trip works out through the whole thing. You're like, by the end, you just look back on the whole thing and you're like, wow, it all made sense. Even up to the point where you got it. And then, like, then everything kind of clicks again. Like, oh yeah, this is all a thing, and it's the dream where I'm awake. But I feel like in
Yeah,
time, when you don't do it for a while, you kind of go back to slumbering in a sense. You kind of
sure.
you fall back down here, or whatever that means. But like if you tripped, you know what that means. But
Yeah. So, like, all I'm saying is, I don't want people that are listening to this that
oh
are
yeah,
trying
for
to
sure,
seek
I would never
sobriety
recommend.
to
Yeah,
be like, well, does that mean I should take acid? The only thing I'm saying is that it's a drug that I haven't completely closed my mind to. It's something that I think there's still some willingness to
yeah.
participate in the future.
Well, I mean, they use it for therapy in some settings. I know for American trials right now, they're kind of like, iffy on it. But I know right now that I think it's the MAPS program or whatever. They're researching psychedelics as a means to pretty much get people to treat depression, to treat PTSD, to treat all types
Yeah,
of
it's
different.
happening in Europe
Yeah,
right now.
yeah,
I
it's
read an article
awesome.
in Time magazine about it.
And I
Yeah,
think it's definitely possible because, like, I feel like just from learning what I've learned during a trip or like whatever it is, connecting with all that, I can see why it would help with those things because the root problem of depression or PTSD and all these things, it kind of like it makes you confront them, and then like your ego is kind of absolved for a second, and you look at it from a perspective that you wouldn't normally look at it from, and from a non-egoic one, like outside your body, just kind of like, all right, this is what's happening in my life or whatever you don't like, and then you try to work on it. And I feel like psychedelics kind of bring all your problems or whatever you're trying to hide right to the front, and then you deal with that shit, and then it makes you a better person in the process. And
Oh,
the
I
reason
agree. I agree. I agree.
depression,
That's what Eastern mysticism was all about,
oh yep,
transcending the ego.
yep.
And I mean,
You
here's
can do
a
that with meditation and other suits,
sure,
obviously, but
sure.
I mean, psychedelics is a quick like boop, and then all of a sudden you're. But like, it's not for everyone. Like I said, some people might experience it and be like psychotically like, "What is this?" and just can't handle it. It's like the Matrix. I love the movie The Matrix because it's the best example I feel like I got for like tripping. And it's like not everyone once they're old enough, you know what I mean. You don't unplug everyone after a certain age. You don't want to like unplug someone because their mind can't handle it. And I feel like for certain people that might be true, like it's just not for them, or their mind just isn't ready for an experience like that, and that's fine because like not for them. But for other people out there, like such as myself or possibly you, I know you've done it in the past. Like that was an experience you were willing to like venture into, and then what you found during that experience was something that like I feel like when we stigmatize those what psychedelics is as just like a bunch of colors and patterns and like, it doesn't it's a lot more than that, but there's no way to ever show anyone that because like the sensations and experience you experience are so transcendental that you can't even describe them with words, or if you did it would take like a whole book just to describe what you saw, but it's not really what it was.
Yeah. I mean, I can remember a turning point for me. I was 16 and I ate peyote for the first
Oh
time.
hell yeah.
Um, and I tripped for a couple days straight
Mm-hmm.
up in the mountains with some friends. And I remember it was the first time that I kind of got and looked at my life
Mm-hmm.
from a more objective standpoint. And I started thinking about how poorly I was treating my parents and how my drug addiction was affecting them.
Yep.
And from that point forward, I took that from my trip and I tried as hard as I could
To
to get
change.
better.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it took me 10 years, but that
just you
was
never
the
stopped though.
first time. It was the first eye opener to the damage that I was really afflicting, and um, yeah, I had a positive experience from that. I took something out of it. I don't know. It might just be fantasy, and I might just be
True.
romanticizing it right now.
True.
I don't know if that's really something that would be appropriate for me because I'm doing so great right now.
No,
But
definitely, I would not advocate it in any like. I know, like you're saying, it just sounds cool in theory. Like I'm saying, I'm not trying to sway or. I just like talking about these subjects because I feel like you're saying, like this is a good dialogue. I feel like to have because not so many people have it, and for us to have it, or just for people to see us have it, is good because it gets knowledge out there and truth. Because I feel like the reality of what psychedelics are is not congruent with what they are in culture, and culture stigmatizes them and makes them seem like they're these like dark negative things. When I could be like, all right, well, alcohol is dark and negative, you know what I mean? But where I could
very
advocate
dark
that
connected.
psychedelics are more positive than alcohol, you know what I mean? There's many arguments to it, but it's like I don't have $1 million to advertise my point as to why, and you know what I mean? Like psychedelics aren't something like alcohol that can be purchased every single day and renewed. So there's no economic, gears tied up in psychedelics at all because it's not like you're going to be tripping every single day. So whereas like something that's alcohol, it's definitely tied into our economic system. Like Super Bowl, we have beer commercials, we have like beer drives this country, among other things, obviously. But like just like so they're never going to get rid of alcohol because it makes too much money. Whereas something like weed or psychedelics are very positive and healing. They like to deem like I feel like this negative light on them, and then put a good light on alcohol for the fact that it's or more of a renewable drug, and then it kind of dumbs people down too. They don't think as much. They just want to party, and then your decision making process is horrible. It's horrible in your body. Like you're more prone to make decisions you wouldn't normally make anyways drunk. But like, whereas if you were tripping, you're not gonna go out and probably like do something nuts. You're probably gonna be like be in the woods tripping, or in your home, or like you're not out in a party. Well, I mean, I tripped at a party, but like that isn't the normal. Like you probably shouldn't do that. But
No, that's more in that school of like, let's take it for a silly drug experience.
yeah, and I'm all about the
And
spiritual and that stuff. I
yeah, for
love it,
sure.
dude.
And the great
The
irony of
journey,
our
dude.
culture is that like the way that we're perceived by the rest of the world is
Yep.
these drunken frat boy imperialistic greedy Americans,
Oh yeah.
because alcohol is our drug of choice and we overindulge. It's just amazing that that's legal and marijuana isn't, you know?
Oh, for sure. But like, I mean, like, you got to think about like what happens when you get high, though. Like, you think, you know what I mean? Like, whereas you're drunk, you're probably not thinking about anything too important. You know what I mean? You're not doing rocket science. You're not like, well, maybe some rocket scientists are getting drunk and doing rocket science, but like, most people, like your average person, I feel like is just, they get drunk and they're like, all right, I'm gonna drink the 6 pack and just watch TV, or I'm gonna, go out and chill with my friends, or let's go to the bars. And let's go to the bars seems to be the typical thing from your 20s to 30s until like you realize what happened to your 20s and 30s, and then like, but I feel like marijuana is like one of those things where you just smoke and you sit down and you're like, why the hell is everything the way it is? Or you know what I mean? Like, you're contemplative. You think about things. It recharges your brain. I mean, maybe not all the time. I mean, there's a certain level of getting high. Like, you can smoke a hit and then think about some deep shit, or you can get really, 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 really high and then just sit there like a vegetable, like they show on TV, where that girl's like melting into the couch, and it's just like, that's not what marijuana. I mean, well, kind of. I mean, it feels good. But it's like, that's not what happens when you get high. Like, or for me anyways, I think about some like profound shit. Like, I think about like quantum physics, or like the universe, or galaxies and crazy shit, or just like, meditation, or mysticism, like you're saying, Buddhism, looking up religions. Like, I like to learn when I get high. Whereas like, if I was drunk, I don't think I would be doing any of that shit. If I was just drunk all
No,
the time, what would I be
uh,
doing?
alcohol is is just such a destructive drug. Like my fiance was an alcoholic, and um, I mean, it almost killed her. You know,
Wow.
we have people that are dying from it. I come
Oh
from,
yeah, it's so bad on your body.
like the majority of heroics, they all have hepatitis C. You
Oh
know, and
yeah.
that's just like pouring fuel on the fire. So alcohol's a bad thing, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but marijuana, I don't look down on people that smoke it, but it's not something I would do, you know?
Oh, yeah, no, for sure, for sure. But anyways, besides like pot, do you mind, or can you talk about how like the events that led up to you even like getting connected with the cartel in Mexico, or
Sure.
like how
Yeah.
does that even happen? Like, how did you jump to like getting to that point? Like, how does that happen?
Um, well, I was at a rehab in Pasadena,
Mm-hmm.
California, and I got a credit card in the mail while I was in rehab with like a $3,500 limit on it. And as
Mm-hmm.
soon as I got that credit card, I was like, all right, I'm going AWOL. I'm gonna go to downtown Los Angeles. I'm gonna get fucking high.
Yeah.
And I went out. I looked for it. I found a Mexican guy, hardly spoke any English,
Yep.
and sold me some dope and gave me his phone number. I went back to Santa Barbara and I started doing heroin there. And a lot of times, people, the quality in Santa Barbara wasn't that high. It was a
Mm-hmm.
lot better in LA. And people would pay me to go down there to pick up balloons of powdered heroin, and bring it back. So started out where they'd pay me. I was getting these balloons for $5.
Mm-hmm.
I was selling them in Santa Barbara for $20, like 100, 200 of them at a time.
Yep.
And eventually, like, I had to move on from the little Mexican guy that I knew to his people to more people. And, in that
Yeah,
world,
just like yeah, you get there.
you just kind of navigate through it. You find people that can supply more.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was selling a lot of Molly too. I was
Oh
selling
yeah.
selling kilos of that. For years. And all of a sudden money started stacking up. I started
Yep.
having 200 grand at a time. And, I'm 22 years old. I've got 22,000 in my safe,
Dude,
or 200,000 in my safe.
it's that Grand Theft
Um,
Auto life.
yeah. So I started buying, keys, and a
Mm-hmm.
key of heroin in California is 30 grand.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
and you make 10,000 profit just selling it in pounds and ounces. So there was a long time with, see, I didn't deal with the cartel out of Mexico.
Yep.
The woman that I knew was deeply associated with this
Okay.
cartel. So they were smuggling it through to California through tunnels, through mules, you
Oh
know.
wow, yeah,
Uh,
yep.
but I didn't, you know, it's like the feds really, when I read my indictment and I got my discovery, they highly sensationalized it. They made it sound like I was like going to fucking weekly meetings in the jungle of Mexico, chewing on coca leaves and shit. And you know, I
Yeah.
wasn't. I knew a fat lady in East LA, you know, like that's all I knew. Um, and they vilified me. They made
Well,
me look
yeah. I
like
mean, they got to get their money. You know what I mean? Because like you're a hot topic at that point. So there's like, how can we make this guy look even crazier and more like insane than like what's going on? Because that draws people in, obviously, for a story.
yeah, I mean, it I wish that I could tell you some big like illustrious tale
I don't care, dude.
about the cartel. You can Google it. The cartel was the Mendoza cartel, based
Oh,
out of
really?
Mexico. 9 people on the case. They ranked me as number 9 as far as like what participatory role I had in it. And like 9 out of 109 when I only got caught with a half pound. I mean, that was straight government hyperbole.
Yeah.
Like it was just bullshit. But it scared me, you know, like you're 10 years in prison will scare anyone. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's a decade gone.
that's a long time. Um, I think it was more interesting that I had a bigger role with psychedelic drugs and especially MDMA and MDA.
Yeah.
Like that was it was more interesting for me to be in that world than to be in the heroin world because the heroin world is so scummy. It's just
Yeah.
like and it wasn't too exciting. Like I
Well, I would imagine MDMA is like a party drug, whereas you're probably like at raves and you're doing like that type of stuff. Whereas heroin, like you're booting up somewhere.
the MDMA was going to drug dealers all over California, Oregon, Washington. So what I did and what was
Hmm.
interesting about that aspect of my life is that I started meeting people in their early 20s that were making, 5, 7, 10 grand a week selling drugs. So everyone's living this just
Illustrious life,
extravagant,
yeah.
crazy life. Like we'd go out for these like $400 dinners and like, you know, go to the craziest private DJ'd parties and
That's
everyone was
awesome.
just living it up. I mean, it was kind of muffled for me because I was shooting heroin the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
So you're kind of floating through it, kind of like a
I was
dream.
just kind of like going with the flow, but it was that part of my life was exciting. The MDMA, the MDA. I sold that for a long time, and I used to get ounces of that.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you know what that drug is, but DMT is the most
Oh, yeah.
powerful
Yeah, I know DMT.
hallucinogen. It's I mean, like the people that I met when I was selling that were just the most interesting people. I went to Burning Man a couple
Hmm.
times. I was really involved in the music festival circuits.
Oh,
I
hell
did
yeah.
Coachella, 10,000 Lakes,
Hmm.
Fish shows, stuff like that. A lot of jam band scenes, but seemed like the MDMA took me to cool places and the
Yep.
heroin took me away from cool places because I was more, you know,
Yeah, the scene, the clientele is completely different. Like,
I only dealt with dealers,
yep.
so
Oh, okay.
it,
So
it wasn't like I was seeing junkies every day.
it's just
I was.
sketchier scene, or
You're talking about white kids in the suburbs that have guns that think they're in a movie. That's what type
yeah.
of thing it was. Um, I mean, looking back and seeing, and it was a lot of people playing characters,
Oh yeah,
and
laughable at best because it's something they
it
saw on TV.
it wasn't real. The MDMA, the acid, all that stuff was more of an artistic feel. Like it was more to
Well,
like free,
musicians and artists and
yeah, free
dancers
expressionism and
and
shit, and people that were making music and
yep.
doing cool things. I have a lot of good memories from that circle, but the heroin was just dark.
Oh
It
yeah.
was a different thing, and then I mean prison over it. It's a big scar on me.
Do you have any advice you give people who are struggling on heroin right now?
You know that the old adage that they say in Narcotics Anonymous,
Yep. So I
that
don't
you
know
gotta,
anything about this, and so like a prospective audience member who would be like struggling per se might not know about any of this stuff. So feel free to just.
if I was addicted to heroin currently, I'd put myself in an NA or AA meeting, not for what the message of the program is, because I'm not part of the program, but for the fact that you get to network with sober people
Yep.
and you can get a support community, because that's really what it comes down to. If you have people pulling in your direction, it's gonna help you a lot. But you have to reach rock bottom. I don't think you can get sober without reaching rock bottom. At least I couldn't. The
Yep.
level that I was ended unless I went to solitary confinement and had all that deep introspection and looked
Yeah.
at my life and was like, okay, I fucked off enough of it. This is what I'm going to do now, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I don't know how to recommend reaching rock bottom to people. It's
No.
not
Yeah.
something you
It's like,
can
yeah,
do,
go hard.
but that's what did it for me. It wasn't, my loving parents, my supportive friends.
Yeah.
None of that stuff really means anything unless you're ready to do it. And you're not going to be ready to do it until you've had enough. And that's the big tragedy with heroin addiction. It's either prison or death, period. Like there's no middle ground. I don't care who you are, how successful you are with selling drugs, you're going to go to prison or you're going to die. And I've lost so many great people to this stupid disease. Goes out to all the people that I've lost. It's been a real tragedy.
For anybody who's not on heroin but is thinking about going on heroin, what would you say to them?
Um, I grew up reading William S. Burroughs, listening to Sublime and Nirvana, and I put a lot of these tortured artists, heroin addicted musicians and artists and writers up on a pedestal because I thought that it was kind of a romantic lifestyle. It was
Yeah.
kind of
Like,
outlaw.
oh, you're on a thing. You're this. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like Batman of the music world, of just like the bad, not the bad guy, but the anti-hero almost. Just like he's this guy, the mysterious, like, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the way that I looked at heroin before, and now that I've gone through it, now that I've had friends that have died to it, I've been to prison over it. I mean, heroin is a drug that you can try. I mean, all hard drugs, cocaine, crystal meth, they're
Yeah.
all so malevolent and vicious. Um, I would definitely advise not to ever try heroin. It didn't do anything cool for me.
No, yeah. It's like, how did you come clean? Or like you said, was it in prison while you were in prison after the 2 years you were there, or did it take a while after that?
It was in prison. I went to solitary confinement,
Yep.
and the guy that I was living with when I got out of solitary confinement was still shooting heroin in prison, and he used to have me injected in his neck. So I really made a very committed change inside of my head because I was helping this guy shoot up every day, but it
Yeah.
just disgusted.
Oh, in his neck. Well, I've
I was,
seen one instance where a friend of mine, I was in Worcester, Massachusetts, and we were meeting up with another buddy, and I didn't even realize he was into heroin and stuff. And he was like, he had a video of him like putting it in his hand, and then like going like this and just flicking the thing. And I was like, what are you doing? But he would put it, yeah, in between weird places, and he'd had like holes all over his body. It was just like, but it was a weird thing for him. Like he liked the actual piercing of the skin. It was like I don't know. It was weird to me, but
sure, it's the ritual.
yeah,
It's
same with me. If I'm gonna grind some weed up and light a bowl, I'm like, oh,
Yeah, it's addicting. I hated needles before, and it's funny you brought up Worcester. That's the place that I shot heroin for the first time. It's
probably.
actually on King Street in downtown
I
Worcester.
don't know where I was, but I hopped into a car, which at the time, like, this is my mini story. I didn't even know the kid. It was my friend's friend, and I get in the back seat with him. He's like, "We're going on a ride," and I was like, all right. And like I was traveling the country trying to get to California because I wanted to be an actor. So we were like taking a Greyhound bus pass, which was like unlimited for 2 months, and we could go all around the country anywhere we want, unlimited. So we were like, all right, let's do it. And I ended up in Worcester, and we met this contact or his friend because it was the only person we knew in that area. And we get in his car, and he drives us on this chase. He's like, I'm going to rob somebody, and I was like, what? And I'm in the back seat, my other friend's in the front seat, and then he's like, we're going to pick my friend up. And then we go and pick up this dude's friend, and he's in the back seat with me now. And then like they went to go try to rob this old man for like drugs. I think it was Oxycontin and like Percocets and heroin. I don't even know. And then they showed up to the guy's house, and then pretended to give him a cell phone as like collateral because his friend just wanted to see the drugs or something. Which is just like an old man that was like, all right, and he gave him the drugs. Kept their cell phone, which was just some fucking dud. And then they bring the drugs back to the car, and they just fucking sped off. And like I'm in the back seat, like what the fuck just happened? And but anyways, yeah, this kid was like ended up shooting up that heroin. He was the one with like the needle finger. It was just nuts. But anyways, that was my Worcester experience. It was like I was just involved in this crazy experience. I didn't even have like any decision. I got straight off the Greyhound bus and then right into this car, and then that all like went down, and then afterwards I ended up back at this dude's house, and he's like, do you want some? Same fucking needle. And I was like, nope. And then he's like, and then he gave me free weed just because I was like, this is fucking retarded, like this is nuts. And then we ended up getting out of there eventually after I smoked my weed. But involvement is just
dilapidated place.
Yep.
That's totally where I started shooting dope. Was in Worcester, Massachusetts, and you could buy bundles on the street there for like $40, 10 bags.
Oh wow.
It's funny, the junkies on the East Coast are a lot different than the junkies on the West Coast. It seems like no one's trying to romanticize it on the East Coast. Everyone's just kind of like, this is what I'm doing. I'm a fucked up addict, but they don't try to play the part.
Yeah.
On the West Coast, everyone seems like they're doing it for attention or something.
Well,
It's
I mean, I feel
like
like it's the Johnny Depp like West Coast style. Like I feel like not to be like I'm on the East. I'm in Maine, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Like the difference between the two, and like I've been to Cali a lot, but I feel like with the West, it's more of like I feel like the West side of the or Cali at least is more eccentric or more luxurious and more like the appeals like California, where like Maine or the East Coast people are just like cold as fuck, and they just like want their fix, and like it's snowing and everybody's miserable walking around, and like whereas Cali it's like beaches and like nice stuff, nice temperature, and it's kind of more of a nicer lifestyle in terms of just like the aesthetic appeal to it. So there's more of an appeal maybe to be like celebrities like Johnny Depp, for instance, like I was saying earlier, like booting up like, I can be like these celebrities. Whereas like there's no celebrities like in Maine or Boston that people are like, yeah, let's shoot up like this cool dude, or like let's go down that path. You watch movies like Blow, and you're like, whoa, like not that I don't want to do that stuff, but any average person out there, that's how they go down that path. Is they see other people doing it, they think it's cool, they heard someone, this guy did it, or it might be fun, or this felt great, but no, I feel like nobody just says I'm gonna do it. It's always someone either recommending it or like there's some type of influence. Maybe I don't know if there was for you or not. Was there somebody that was like, kind of like, were they like, did it get offered and then you were like, all right, or
this is what happened, because I was always scared of needles.
I was just saying I could never
even
ever do it just for that fact, and I wouldn't anyways. But
are we still there? It says there's an internet connection problem. We're still good?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right. I was scared of needles, and it's something that my best friend got into on the West Coast, and I just had no interest in doing. It seemed so disgusting to me, and I was scared of needles. Like I hate getting my blood drawn, or I used to. I mean, I don't have a problem with needles anymore, but one day I'm in Worcester, I'm on this King Streets downtown, to cop, and I had, this is probably going to come off as sounding racist, but you really shouldn't trust black people in the hood in Worcester. It's like I'd been robbed by them so many times. It seemed like the Puerto Ricans were the ones that actually sold the heroin and the black guys stole it. I know that sounds bad. I'm not racist at all.
Hmm.
In fact, I'm
Well, I
totally
mean,
against racism,
same here.
but
I'm not racist by any but I know what you mean. In certain stereotypes do hold true in certain circumstances.
yes. So, and
That's why they're a
when you're
stereotype, but it's not
when
for everyone because that's a
when you're
stereotype.
trying to like, maneuver your way through the ghettos,
Yeah,
it's almost
especially in
like
the
you have
drug
to be,
scene, like you're gonna come across shifty people,
yeah.
and who are the
And
shifty people in that area that have to live in that area?
I'm not making an absolute statement. Not all the black people are bad in Worcester,
Oh
Massachusetts,
no.
but the ones I dealt with were. I got robbed a couple times where I'd give someone their money and they just run in the other direction, stuff like
Oh
that.
hell yeah.
Puerto Ricans always seemed to have it, and it was always a smooth transaction. So that's who I went to. There was this certain corner, like I said, it was on King Street in Worcester, and someone dropped me off in a pickup truck to go get a bundle.
Hmm.
Um, I went to go get it, and there was only one black guy on the street. It was snowing that night, and there was just one black guy. And I was like full blown sniffing it every day type thing at that point.
Yeah.
So I had a habit. I was feeling withdrawal. So even going against what I already knew, I just went to and I asked him if he could help me out. And he said that he had some dope on him, and he
Hmm.
had me follow him into this abandoned house.
Of course.
Right when we get into the abandoned house, he pulls a needle or he pulls a gun out on me, right, and a needle, and he starts accusing me of being a cop. And I'm a little college 18-year-old, never seen a gun pointed to me at all, and
Yeah.
it's very frightening experience for me. And he's telling me I'm a cop. I'm telling him I'm not, and he's handing me the needle
18 years old, you're a cop.
yeah, and he's handing me the needle, and I had like really long hair at the time. He's handing me the needle, and he's saying, "I want you to shoot it in front of me." And I told him that I snorted. I don't even know how to shoot it. And he puts the gun down, cooks it up, and he's like, "Stick your arm my way." And I put my arm that way. I'd already given him the money at that point,
Yeah.
and he shot me up, and that was it. I never snorted heroin again from
Yeah.
that point forward. It was like, the high was so amplified from the syringe, that just, and then like the scene that I was in totally embraced it. They all listened to Velvet Underground and were like
Yeah.
those type of East Coast like artsy type people, and I think they all thought it was pretty outlaw to be shooting heroin, so
Yeah,
everyone
like
started
it comes
doing it.
across as a cool thing because it's the taboo thing. Like, oh, don't do it, and then everybody wants to do it. Not that everyone's like, oh, I want to do heroin, but it's just the same reason. Like people like, oh, I'm never gonna smoke cigarettes, and then you find people smoking cigarettes. And, well, no, I'm just kidding. But just like the cool like, yeah. But I mean, it has an appeal to it. Just like even when you're talking to people, it just feels cool. The feeling of it's awesome. Like everything. Like when I smoke a joint or something, the same feeling. Like it just has like a good feel, but then the psychological like I'm doing this.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I know this like I don't know. I'm trying to articulate this, but I
I'll
guess
take
it
it
just
down.
felt cool, like
Yeah.
shooting dope. Like it really felt like we were fringe and like we were immersive, and
Yeah.
you know, it was like a way to express ourselves. And I look back on that and I'm just disgusted by the my train of thought at that point in my life. But that's honestly how I felt. I just thought that
Hmm.
it was a really cool thing to do. I'm like, okay, I'm doing the same thing that Kurt Cobain was doing before he died. Like,
Exactly. That's what I was trying to say with the Johnny Depp thing. Like I use Johnny Depp as an example, but Kurt Cobain, good example. Just like that idea, someone very very popular and well known having done it, and then it's like, oh, I'm kind of like them because you associate to be like people you admire, and so like,
yeah, it's the most easily attainable way to be like somebody that you admire. It's
yeah,
like, I don't have to put out a record, but I can shoot heroin, and then I'm still
yeah,
like Kurt Cobain in my own
yeah,
weird, drugged out delusions.
yeah, and you're exactly,
And
but
you know what? That is why I made the protagonist of my
mhm,
book a rock star, because that is how
the
I
fall,
feel I was looking at myself when I was using it. It
Hmm.
was this fake persona that I was trying to present to other people. I
Yeah.
really like it got to a point where I was doing heroin for attention. Like I just wanted people to treat me in a certain way, you know? It was really pathetic, you know?
I mean, like looking back, do you feel like everything happened for a reason for you to get where you're at here, though? I mean, like having had everything happen, and then now you have your book, which is something you can like give to the world and help others. Do you think it all happened for a reason, or are you very like regretful things had to happen that way?
I'm regretful. The book is not worth the pain that I put my family and friends through. Um, if I could take it all back, I would have done that internship program. I would have gone on to
Yeah.
college. I would have taken it, you know, I wouldn't have taken the drug thing to the extent that I did.
Yep. Well, I mean, at least that's like a good message. I feel like the audience to hear. Like, I mean, especially for people who are like, "Oh, I think I'm gonna try that." My friends are doing that. Like, maybe I'll try it. Like, it's good to just hear from people who have tried it and are like, "No, that's not even something you should start at all."
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm happy with where my life's at now. I would have
Yeah.
never met my fiance if I we hadn't crossed paths at the time that
Yep.
we did. I'm happy about that. I'm happy that it made me stronger in a sense. Um, I feel more robust now,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that I'm more equipped to deal with whatever comes my way. Like if I get behind on a bill or something, it's not that big a deal. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember sitting in a jail cell with the prospect of 10 years in front of me.
Yep. A
You
bill
know,
is not
like
as yeah.
it's, the little trivial things in life just don't seem to affect me like they affect some of my friends that have.
Yeah, because you've been so desensitized because you just had so much more insane experiences than they have had. And so like it's kind of dull to you in a certain sense because or toned down because it's like, oh, it's just like that, like whatever, I've done with way crazier shit than that, like it's a bill, whatever, I'll deal with it, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, so I'm happy with that aspect of it, but like I said, I regret it. None of it was worth it. None of the experiences I
Mm-hmm.
had were worth anything that I put people through, put myself through. I mean, at the end of the day, I put myself through a hell of a lot, and yeah, it was just, I mean, anyone that's thinking about doing drugs like that, it just really needs to question where they want to be.
Yeah.
Because when I was in high school, the kind of people that I thought were cool were the people that didn't give a fuck, like
Yeah.
the people weren't taking class seriously. And now that I'm
That's
almost
cool.
30,
It's like
now
that
that
dude's
I'm
gonna work at
almost
McDonald's
30,
someday.
yeah, now that I'm almost 30, I'm looking back at the people that I thought were cool, and I'm looking at the people that I ignored because they did what they were supposed to do. And I'm like, the people that did what they were supposed to do and took the right steps are people that I respect and admire now. Like every time I hear that someone that I went to high school with is successful now, that they one of my friends is a brain surgeon now. I mean, the utmost respect for that person,
That's crazy, yeah.
and he came from nothing. He grew up in a household of a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
and now he's making $400,000 a year. He's married, he's doing
Mm-hmm.
great. So just everything, my outlook on life has changed a lot, and I wish that I could tell my young self then, like, hey, what's cool is
Yeah.
to be good to society and to have a fulfilling life. The fuck you to society is not a cool thing. It's not a good look.
Yeah. um Where can listeners learn more about your book? Like, where can it be purchased at? Or do you have a website or Twitter handle or any way that like listeners can get a hold of you or get access to you and your book?
I'm active on Twitter.
Yep.
If somebody tweets me, I'll respond to it. My Twitter handle's Ryan Leone 85. My book Wasting Talent is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, and you can go to wastingtalent.com and you can buy it from there too.
Awesome. Well, one last thing. If you could give one piece of advice to anybody listening, what would it be?
It's a good question. I have to think about it.
No, take your time. They're still gonna be here. I know it.
Um,
Like if you were to have last words, what would they be? Not your physical last words, but the last words to this interview. What?
I think probably the most important thing in life
Hmm.
and the greatest lesson I've learned is to find out what you love to do in that life and try to do something that's rewarding. And instead of focusing on material things, focus on
Yep.
the people that matter to you, and don't take family for granted. I pissed my parents away a lot through my drug years, and if I have one big regret, that's what it is, that I just didn't
It's the
give them the
time.
respect they deserve.
Yep. Well, dude, it's been awesome talking to you, and I really appreciate you being on the Conquest Podquest, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
For sure, dude. And like I said, everybody, you can reach him. Was it Ryan Leone 85?
Yes, Twitter.
Awesome on Twitter. And then wastingtalent.com.
Yep.
Awesome for
And the
the
name of
book.
the book's Wasting Talent. It's
All
on
right.
Amazon.
And I'll
So
make sure to like link all this stuff together. But all right. Well,
okay,
thank you
great.
very much,
Hey,
man.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Have a wonderful night, and I'll be in touch soon.
Yeah,
All right,
same to
man.
you. Bye.
Bye.